A single whistle echoes across a moonlight ocean. A collier named USS Cyclops slides silently through calm waters, its deck humming with routine. It holds heavy with coal, but between Barbados and Baltimore, she disappeared. No flares, no scream, no wreckage. Just endless night. 309 souls vanished beneath the waves, leaving behind only questions. What force could swallow an entire ship? This is the tale of the Cyclops, the US Navy's greatest riddle, and the shocking part is that the theory itself shocked everyone, which is ridiculous on its own. Welcome to CTT Stories, ladies and gentlemen, where history's greatest mysteries come alive with cinematic soul. Today, we set sail into the unknown, chasing shadows on the high seas. With that, let's start today's story from an unexplained ocean waves and try to understand what actually happened on that night and those who lost their lives on that ship. Long before her final voyage, the USS Cyclops was born into an era when coal was the lifeblood of empires. It was 1910 when this hulking collier slipped down the ways at Camden, New Jersey, still leviathan, 3/4 of a football field long with funnels rising like watchtowers. She was designed to carry 10,000 tons of coal, the black gold that fueled battleships, trains and factories. In peacetime, Cyclops piled the Atlantic, shuttling between Norfolk and Caribbean ports, her hull groaning under the weight of her precious cargo. When First World War erupted in Europe, the United States Navy urgently needed ships like her to keep its fleet alive. Cyclops became more than a workhorse. She became a symbol of America's commitment to victory over Europe. Captain George W. Bremner was an experienced sailor in his mid-50s, a man who knew his ships inside out. Under his command, Cyclops had completed dozens of voyages. He ran a tight ship. Cole Stoker worked in sweat and soot, shifting piles after piles below deck, when lookouts scanned the horizon for U-boats surfing the waves. Among his 309 crew members were kids born after 1900s, boys who enlisted for adventures, for steady pay to send home and to wives and families. They ate salt pork, black coffee, and dreamed of returning home safely. Yet, even as they shoveled coal and checked pumps, rumors of mechanical gremlins haunted every whisper. Stress, cracks in the hull's rivets, weak bucketheads in heavy seas. Still, Cyclops had withstood storms before. By spring 1918, Cyclops was overdue for a refit, but the Navy's need overrode caution. Captain Bremner was ordered to make one more run, take a full load of coal from Barbados to Baltimore. On the docks of Bridgetown, he oversaw the loading of 10,000 tons of manganese ore alongside the coal, dense ore that crowded the ship's hold and strained her ballast. Several sailors complained of waves of weakness and fever. In the days prior, an outbreak of Blackwater fever, an especially violent form of malaria, had swept among the local population. A few crew members had fallen ill, but medical officers had cleared them as fit for duty. Still, the unease lingered. Whispers that disease might spread, that something unseen threatened them. On the morning of March 16, 1918, Cyclops slipped her moorings under a light Caribbean sky. Families on shore watched from piers, waving farewells to fathers, husbands and brothers who waved back with confident smiles. The ship's whistle blared as she turned north. Iceberg flags trailed behind. The air was warm, the sea calm, and none aboard suspected that the fate had already marked them as Cyclops steamed out of Bridgetown Harbor. Her engineers stocked the boilers and her crew settled in for a routine crossing. But beneath the whine of engines and hissing of steam, the seed of mystery was planted, one that would leave the Navy and the world grappling with how a mighty collier could vanish as if it never existed. By the early mornings of March 17th, Cyclops had slipped away from Barbados and cut smoothly through the calm waters of Caribbean. The deckhands scrubbed the rails, sweat glistening on their forehead. Below, the coal stalkers shoveled black lumps into the boiler that roared like a living beast. All around, the air smelled of salt and hot metal. For a moment, it felt like any other voyage, nothing to hint at the disaster about to unfold. Late that afternoon, Captain George entered the small radio room. The equipment crackled and hummed. He took a steady breath, tapped the keys, and sent his routine signals. USS Cyclops, position 17° north, 60° west. All well. Estimated time of arrival in Baltimore, tomorrow. Still, everyone brushed aside those fears. Cyclops had weathered storms before. No one thought to worry that they might be sailing into something unseen. On March 18th, the time came for Cyclops to check in again. But no messages came. The radio room remained eerily silent, save for static. Back in Norfolk, the radio operators frowned at their empty dials. Captain Hendrick, a stern man with a bushy mustache, barked orders.
Send search vessels immediately. Notify destroyers. We need a word from Cyclops now.
By midday, 2 destroyers cut through the sea towards the Cyclops' last known course. A Navy plane lifted off from Chesapeake Bay, engines screaming as it climbed into the sky. They scanned miles of open blue. Nothing but turquoise, waves and drifting clouds. No smoke, no lifeboats, no signs of a ship in a distress. On board the destroyers, sailors peered through binoculars, hearts pounding. Is that a mast on the horizon? No, just a cloud. But back on Cyclops, if any of the crew still manned her, there was no flare, no frantic pounding on the door. No one voiced a warning. She simply sailed on, ghost-like, until she faded from radar and then from the memory. By March 19th, rumors raced faster than the search vessels. In coastal towns, families gathered in telegram offices, clutching tear-stained letters from the week before. Wives stared at posters with photos of their husbands in crisp Navy uniform. Children traced their fathers' faces with trembling fingers. Each heartbeat in those rooms was a prayer. Tell me he's safe. Please let him be safe. In Norfolk, sailors who had sailed with Cyclops shared grim whispers over a mug of coffee. She was overloaded with ore. I wouldn't trust that old hull in a storm. I heard U-boats were near. It's a dangerous stretch, but no one knew which whisper might explain the ship's fate. The only certainty was absence. Cyclops gave no signal, no smoke, no distress call. On March 20th, the final search planes returned. Captain squinted through their maps and logbooks, then lowered their heads in defeat. The ocean kept its secret. In the fading light of that third day, the waves lapped the empty docks where Cyclops should have returned. A single seagull cawed overhead, circling the spot where collier once stopped. On the deck, no figure waited to receive cargo. On the quay, no cheers greeted her arrival. just an open, yawning silence stretching over miles of water, an empty stage for a tragedy no one had yet begun to understand. By March 21st, official word arrived. The USS Cyclops was officially overdue and presumed lost. Across the East Coast, a hush fell over naval stations and coastal towns alike. In Norfolk and Baltimore, telegram messages rode their course at dawn, delivering grim notices to families who still clung to hope. The phrase "presumed lost" felt like a cruel twist, almost too final to believe. On cobblestone streets, sailors lined up outside small chapel, lighting candles for missing friends. Mothers clutched faded uniforms, pressing buttons on their cheeks as though wishing for a last glimpse of a loved one. In muddy harbors, aged dock workers stared towards the horizon, searching for a shape that would never appear. The irony was bitter. Cyclops had been built to fuel America's war effort. Yet now she was gone, empty of wars, empty of crew, swallowed by an ocean that refuses to answer. The Navy established a commission of inquiry. Admirals in stretched uniforms gathered around polished oak tables, flipping through charts and logs. They reconvened behind closed doors, quoting weather reports, checking U-boat patrol records, and interviewing captains who had sailed similar routes. Yet they found no smoking gun. No single explanation could account for a 542-foot-long collier vanishing without a trace. Meanwhile, in newspapers from New York to Norfolk, headlines screamed, "Navy collider vanishes. Over 300 sailors missing. No clue." Editorial cartoonist drew the Cyclops as a ghost ship, her masts skeletal and her deck haunted. Rumors blossomed like weeds. Some claimed a secret German minefield. Others whispered sailor had abandoned ship after mutiny. A few declared mystical vortex had swallowed her whole. The public devoured every rumor, clinging to any thread, no matter how thin, that might explain the void. For the families, however, rumors offered little comfort. In small parlor in Massachusetts, Mrs. Eleanor Harris stared at a black and white photo of her husband. Petty officer James Harris had been only 22, a fresh face among seasoned sailors. Each night she walked into the shoreline, whispering his name into the waves, hoping for a sign, a flicker of lantern light, the echo of a whistle. When none came, her grief turned inward, a silent storm that raged far from others' view. Across the Chesapeake Bay, Lieutenant Robert, Cyclops navigation officer, sat alone in his office, tracing his finger along a chart of the Atlantic. He refused to accept presumed lost. Instead, he scribbled notes. March 17, messages sent clear. March 18th, no response. Possible hull breach. He stared at a blank space on the map. That empty ocean felt like a challenge. Find the ship, prove she existed. But with each passing hour, the map remained unchanged. No coordinates, no debris field, no wreckage. Even sailors who had served on Cyclops felt a hollow ache. Chief Petty Officer Samuel, who had transferred off the collier just weeks before, spent night at the naval hospital, caring for the wounded Navy officers. But in quieter moments, he replayed his last conversation with Captain Bremer. "Hurry back in one piece, Captain," Sammy had said, grinning. "She's as steady as they come." Bremer replied, "I'll see you at home." That promise now felt like a distant echo, broken by a sea that refused to give answers. By April, the commission released a partial report. No evidence of enemy action, possible struggle failure, wreckage not located. The language was cautious, almost sterile, designed to reassure the public, but for the families still clutching faded photographs, it offered only frustrations. In quiet homes, a widow's lamp burned through the night, a symbol of a hope that they couldn't fully extinguish. In the months that followed, the Navy updated its records. Cyclops was stricken from the roster. Her name joined the sailors named on marble plaques in the memory of 309 men of USS Cyclops 1910 to 1918. No ceremony could fill the void. No plaque could answer the question echoing in every heart: what truly happened to that ship that never called all clear? As spring turned to summer, the Atlantic settled into its usual rhythms. Merchant vessels resumed voyages, warship prowled the lanes, but somewhere in the deep, where currents twist and trenches yawn, the Cyclops remained a silent shadow whose fate would haunt the sailors and families for generations to come. As months turned into years, the silence around the USS Cyclops only grew louder. In the empty spaces where answers should be, legends took root. Sailors, scholars, and grieving families clung to ideas, each more unsettling than the last. What truly claimed that collier and her 309 souls? First theory suggests structural collapse under overload. Many believe Cyclops' final cargo was her undoing. Manganese ore is heavy, much denser than coal, loaded side by side in cramped hold. The shifting ore could have thrown the ship off balance. Imagine turbulent waves slamming against her steel flanks. In a sudden roll, the ore lurches, gouging the bulkheads. Water pours in, overwhelming pumps. In a minute, a crack opens in the hull like a wound. Crewmen scramble to seal it, but the surge is too swift. Below deck, darkness swallows men's shouts. On deck, sailors fight to drop the lifeboats, only to find them torn free by raging seas. In that final chaos, Cyclops slips beneath the waves, leaving no time to distress signal. Yet, if she sank so violently, why was there never so much as lifeboat or a plank? The ocean here is deep, currents fierce. Any wreckage could be buried in silt or dragged into the abyss. The second theory suggests enemy sabotage. First World War was a battleground of shadows. German U-boats sailed the Atlantic like steel sharks, and espionage thrived under neutral flags. Some argue that U-boats U-151 lurked nearby on March 18th. Picture a silent torpedo slicing through calm waters in the dead of the night. No thunderous explanation, just a muffled groan as steel meets steel underwater. Cyclops' hull groans and splinters. Below deck, the light flickers and die. Officers scramble to launch lifeboats. But in murky darkness, they are clipped by debris or drawn under by suction. By dawn, the U-boat slipped away unnoticed. Yet German reports never confirmed a kill. And the Union Slim, a nearby cargo ship, reported no torpedo tracks in the water. Could the attackers have removed the evidence, or did they simply misidentify their prey? Without a federation of witnesses, this theory hangs on whispers. Theory number 3 suggests mass mutiny or discretion. Whispers of Blackwater fever still haunts Cyclops' memory. Some suggest disease crept below deck, driving men to delirium. Imagine fevered sailors, faces drawn by chills, stumbling across coal and fire. In their haze, rumors swirl. The ship is cursed. The sea itself is hungry. If panic spreads, they might have gathered on deck in frenzied number, cutting ropes, tossing cargo into the sea, even forcing the captain aside. Perhaps they abandoned ship in lifeboats, drifting until hope died. But this raises a question. Where are the lifeboats? None were found, and a mutiny involving hundreds would leave survivors, men who knew too much. No journal, no widespread confession ever surfaced. If they all perished in a storm after abandoning a ship, their bodies or boats should have washed ashore. Instead, only silence followed. Theory number 4 suggests the Bermuda Triangle connection. Though Cyclops never technically crossed the classic Bermuda Triangle, her route skirted its edges. The triangle is bathed in moonlight lore, compass needles spinning wildly, electronics failing, ships lost without a trace. Picture Cyclops sailing into a pocket of magnetic confusion. Her compass goes haywire. Her engines flatter, and in the gloom, she drifts off the course. Crewmen, unable to navigate, watch helplessly as the horizon tilts. In storybooks, they vanish into a swirling vortex, never to reappear. Modern science pushes back. Rogue currents, sudden storms, and human error explain most triangle vanishings. But for those who believe Cyclops is the perfect poster child, 309 lives erased by an invisible force of nature, Theory 5 suggests a darker conspiracy. Some speak in hushed tones of a plot darker than any storms or engine failure. They claim Cyclops carried sensitive cargo, top secret documents, or priceless treasures bound for Europe. In that telling, powerful interests didn't want the ship to deliver its load. Perhaps a clandestine group planted explosives in her cargo hold, set to detonate once she reached a specific latitude. On March 18th, those charges ignite. The fire races through her decks. Men below are trapped, screaming as smoke chokes the corridor. On deck, a single explosion rips the lifeboat davits. In an instant, Cyclops is a flaming tomb. But once again, there's no chariot wreckage or oil slicks marking such a blaze. And no source have ever produced proof of secret cargo. Yet families who lost fathers and husbands cling to this version, hoping that if sabotage is true, someone somewhere holds the key. In the end, none of these theories satisfy fully. Each carries a kernel of truth. Structural strain, wartime threats, human frailty, or whispered conspiracies. But none can explain the final moments of Cyclops beyond doubt. The ocean refuses to listen to our demands. It keeps its secret well beneath crushing waves. Nearly a century has passed, but the echo of Cyclops' disappearance still ripples across the time. Picture that horizon again. Endless blue meeting sky where no beacon glimmered and no sailor's cry pierced the hush. For those left behind, the void was more than an absence of sound. It was a wound that never healed. Think of Mrs. Harris in Massachusetts, who kept a single lantern burning each night in her window. She whispered James's name to the sea, imagining his face in the moonlight waves, but the ocean offered only salt and sorrow. Her friends told her to let go, to accept presumed loss. Yet for Eleanor, presumed became a promise she couldn't abandon. Every time a ship's horn sounded in the distance, her heart surged. only to crash when she saw no family's silhouette. Lieutenant Green, back at the Norfolk office, never stopped mapping possibilities even after the commission closed its files. He imagined Cyclops wedged into deep trenched, her hull intact, her crew frozen in the final moments. He wondered if sunlight from above ever reached the decks, or if she lay in darkness, a steel ghost in the deep. With each new sonar scan or deep-sea expedition, he felt a flicker of hope, only to have it snuffed out when the instruments returned nothing. And then there are the stories of sailors who encountered something in the water. One veteran claimed he felt a sudden chill as he crossed Cyclops' route in 1942. He spoke of seeing a ripple on a calm sea, like a phantom ship cutting through glass. Others says that on stormy nights you can still hear a distant, mournful whistles just once before the wind swallows it. Whether the tales are truth or a myth, they capture a deeper fear. Whether these tales are truth or a myth, they capture a deeper fear that the ocean remembers and sometimes chooses to remind us that it is eternal and unknowable. What does Cyclops' fate teach us about human fragility? We build vessels on steel and code, confident we can bend natures to our will. Yet one overloaded hold, one hidden crack, one silent torpedo could erase us. The sea becomes a mirror, reflecting our hubris and respect in equal measures. We send fathers, sons, and brothers into its embrace, believing they will carry our hopes and stories home. When they don't return, the stories fracture. Lost chapters in families' pedigree, unanswered questions that gone at the heart. Some mystery challenge our need for closure. We crave facts, timelines, proof, yet the ocean laughs at our maps. In Cyclops' story, there's no neatly tied ribbon, no monument of wreckage on a sunlit reef. There's only the pull of currents and the memory of men who trusted steel and steam. Their names rest on plaques, but their voices drift on a wave we cannot hear. In the silence, perhaps there is a lesson. Not every story ends with answers. Sometimes the greatest legacy is questions itself. The space it creates in our minds to wonder, to hypnotize, to cherish the fragility of life. Cyclops reminds us that even our greatest technology, our finest plans, can dissolve like mist at sea. Thank you for sailing with us into the unknown depths of the USS Cyclops mystery. If the silent sea still haunts your thoughts, hit like and subscribe for more cinematic history that challenges what we think we know. Drop a comment below. Still searching? If you believe Cyclops' secret remains waiting beneath the waves. Until next time, stay curious, keep questioning, and remember, some stories vanish into the deep. But here at CTT Stories, their echoes lives on. And I'll see you in the next one.